Hello, and how are you?
Fine, thank you. And how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Could you walk us through a typical weekday for you?
A typical weekday is one spent shared between my work at the Anti Corruption Commission, like the Mondays and the Thursdays, and my law practice between Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Friday, where I like at the commission, I have the responsibility of heading the legal work of the commission. So it's a lot of work around supporting the legal framework around ending corruption in all sorts of ways. And then at the law practice, it's around the whole gamut of law practice, such as consulting with clients, drafting, giving advice, and going to court when the matters need to go to court. And then on Saturdays, I try and wind down and spend time with family. With my father, I used to spend time with my mother as well, but she left us just in January. And she left us not like she passed away, let me say. I might create the wrong impression. And then all with family and my sons and friends and enjoying what the city has to offer. And on Sundays, because now it looks like it will be possible to go to church to celebrate Holy Mass again. I am Catholic, so the lockdown had locked down everything. So now I think things will really change. Yeah.
What's your favorite novel of all time and why?
It has to be Native Son by, I believe it's Richard Wright. Why? Because it's a novel that I read it when I was fairly young. I was, I think I was around maybe 10, 11 years old, and it just touched me. It stirred me in a very deep way about the injustice in the world around race issues, and race, because it's and the unfairness of discrimination against people of black color in life in America set around life in America for a young black man who accidentally kills a white woman, and because of the fear and the injustice ends up doing even more outrageous things and gets into more trouble because of the very tragic unevenness between credibility and belief, because who would ever believe him as he thought in himself. So that novel really paints the portrait of the human condition, about fears, hopes, and decision making, about how and also about chance and fate, about how fate can just change your life in the most unexpected way, and also how decisions we make can also then affect outcomes. And then you always be asking, but what if he had owned up and just said, look, this is what had happened, would it have been better or worse? But yeah, that's why it's so intriguing. That's why it makes me think, and up to now. Yeah.
On your Twitter description, you say that you're an alto. Have you always had a passion for singing?
Yes, definitely. I've been wanting to sing since I was young, but I must confess, I'm not. I sing, but I don't profess to be a good singer. I enjoy it. I absolutely love it. I've been finding myself in choirs from school, church, Sunday schools, and issues like that. So I love to sing. I had my tonsils removed when I was 9, and so my voice is a bit interesting, but I just love to sing. It makes me happy.
You're an MP and deputy. You were an MP and a deputy minister. Whilst working as a lawyer, how did you balance it all?
When I was elected as an MP, initially I could practice because I wasn't a deputy minister. But when I was then appointed a deputy minister in 2009 as a deputy minister for justice in the inclusive government, I couldn't continue practicing personally, physically. So I decided to enter into a partnership in my firm with a fellow lawyer who is also a politician, and so I became what's called a sleeping partner, where I wouldn't then be in the office every day, but I would be in the background, so that's what enabled me to balance it in a way. And then when the inclusive government, as it's called, but I always think that I don't think it was an inclusive government. I call it a transitional coalition government. because I saw very little of government, I mean of national and of unity there, but that's another story for another day. When it ended, I was able to then get back into practice full time and was then member of parliament, and as well as practicing the law. So I could balance, I think, because I had a fantastic team of people at the office who were able to, to be relied upon to do quality work, but also because being a member of parliament is not like a full-time, in the Zimbabwean system isn't a full-time kind of model like you'd get, let's say, maybe in Kenya or somewhere else. Because I hear that it was modeled interestingly around even because even if it was borrowed from England, but the lives of farmers in the colonial times, that we find that most of the people who were MPs were these white male farmers who would be from all over the country. They do their farming, then they drive to Harare or Salisbury then and sit in parliament in the afternoon between Tuesdays and Thursday, and are able to go back. So it's but of course there were committees to sit in between, but it wasn't, and then also to attend to the constituency, but it really isn't designed to be like a job. So I think that's how I was able to balance. Yeah.
Who inspires you every day, and how have they inspired your work, and how did they inspire you to be the person you are today?
Wow, I have a few, like people who inspire me, very important, special people. The first ones are my parents, of course. Look, they taught me everything that I know about life, and they educated me and imbued me and trained me with the values of integrity, hard work, honesty, and humility, and just that's what they. And professionalism. But they really taught me, both of them, my father and my late mother. They really trained me and brought me up to see what professionals and professionalism is about. So that inspires me every day. But I'm also inspired by not like every day. I don't think about her every day, but I love her. Like the work she's done and what she represented. This is the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize, the late Professor Wangari Maathai. She inspires me because she, apart from a lot of first things that she did, she epitomizes the strength and the intelligence and the power of an African woman who's confident about herself and confident about her continent and about her surroundings, and is not afraid to speak her mind and to pursue truth, and is not afraid and will not be bullied. I particularly I enjoyed reading her autobiography called Unbowed, and I think she really does. And I think she was shortchanged, because with all her accomplishments, she was even the first East African woman to get a PhD and so on, and she was truly gifted. She was an intellectual giant, and she had a heart bigger than everybody else. But with all her accomplishments and her fiery character, when she then went into the political arena because she wanted to influence things, all she ever got to in terms of the level was a mere deputy minister. And with respect to all the other men who were there in Kenya and who were serving with her, I don't think they could hold, I think, half a candle to what she could do. But I think that goes to that's what happens to women a lot. They are undervalued and not. They can be as good as they get, but for some they are not regarded as just that. Yeah. So, but anyway, she inspires me, as well as Mother Teresa. Of course, she is like the all-time beacon of hope and the things that are true, that are good, the important things in life, the regard for another human being, and that humanity, and those inspire me.
You accomplished a lot of work. What would you say is your biggest accomplishment?
I would say that my biggest accomplishment as a member of parliament was, I'd say, please allow me to say two. I'd say outside the parliament itself, I want to believe that I will be remembered for having for having, how can I call it, like humanized and popularized Parliament and the work that Parliament does, and actually bringing the hard and sometimes boring grind of the decisions made in Parliament to life. In the constituency, I set out to make I used to call the Harare Westerners see in their day-to-day lives the relevance of Parliament, and I want to think that I did. So that's one of them. And the other one, I would say it's a toss. In Parliament, I did quite a few things. I'll just toss between two. One of them was that I am glad that I got to be able to influence, to get the former president to cause him to come to Parliament and start issuing the State of the Nation address in terms of the Constitution. He was disobeying it. Adopted the new Constitution in 2013. It required that the president make an address at least once a year to Parliament, and 2 years down the line he had not done so. And so I asked the vice president, he was the Minister of Justice, who's now the president, why on earth the president was disobeying the Constitution when it is his primary function in terms of Section 80 of the Constitution to uphold, obey and defend the Constitution. And he accepted and acceded, and then had to promise that, he is going to do that. And sure indeed he came, and so now we have that. And then the other thing was, I would say, is what is actually is happening now. And I'm really glad to see that the fruits of my labors are ripening, even when I'm no longer a politician or an MP. This was the introduction, because now there's a sexual offences bill that's being debated that is going to introduce mandatory stiff sentences for rape and other forms of gender-based violence. I am pleased to say that was my handiwork. I moved a motion for there to be legislation, so that I pushed the executive to make sure that we raise the lower ceiling for rape and other forms of gender-based violence. And I would say those are some of my two best accomplishments that I'll be happy. But can I just say something that I'm also happy about? When I was Deputy Minister for Justice for a brief moment, I'm glad that I contributed. I would say I did cause the reduction of the death rate in prisons by 97%. That was in 2009, when about eight people were dying every day in Zimbabwe's prisons. It was a time of phenomenal suffering. So I used my influence and did certain things, and with the International Committee of the Red Cross, and brokered a missing link that had been so difficult to link with the ministry. That allowed them to then come into prisons, and because they were being kept out for some, I think, unreasonable, egotistical reasons, let me say. So I hitched the wagon, and when they came in, it fell. So I'm really pleased and grateful that I got a chance to do something like that. Yeah.
You are on the board of Zimbabwean Women Lawyers Association. There is still a huge gap in equal judicial representation. What can more women do to ensure that this doesn't happen?
Okay, thanks Vera. But I used to be on the board. I was unelected at the last annual general meeting. I wasn't elected in, so I used to be on the board. But I am a member, and clearly a very proud and eager member of the Zimbabwe Women Lawyers Association. I think what can be done to reverse and to correct the imbalance against women in the judiciary is for really I think those who are the Judicial Service Commission itself, to rectify that. It has to, when it conducts interviews for judges, it's got to make sure that it puts in place measures that encourage women to be nominated. Yes, some will say, but why do they need to be encouraged? But that's the truth about women. Women have been really oppressed and marginalized for so long, and even those who know that they're capable of delivering, might not be that confident and might need that nudge, that push. And so why shouldn't we do that? Because our constitution requires that at least 50% of positions in decision making, elected and appointed, are held by women. So that has to be done. In the last appointments for judges, when I was in the board of Zwale, we were moving that the Judicial Service Commission actually stops its interviews, so that it because the candidates, there were very few women candidates that were there for the Supreme Court, and it was clear that the outcome was not going to be gender equal as is required. So, and also there are a lot of things to encourage women also to have the confidence, to encourage them and support them when they hold public office, and because if you go to the magistrates level, they are so, I mean, I haven't counted them, but I want to believe they are preponderantly female. But when you go, the higher you go, the maler it becomes. So, because women can definitely hold judicial positions, but there's need for concerted effort from the Judicial Service Commission, from the policy level of government, from the Gender Commission, the Human Rights Commission, lawyers and women's organizations, and the media. We need to do a lot of work, and we should.
Why do you think women are lagging behind in leadership positions in the government and in the corporate sector?
It's because of the construction of society by patriarchy. Women are raised to be subservient and to be muted and to be in the background and to be not so it, mostly, and to get, women and girls who put their heads above the parapet are usually exceptional, and sometimes when they dare to do that, a hammer comes and bangs them to go down. So this is the reason why, and of course, and this is done not always in violent ways, but sometimes in violent ways, but sometimes in very gentle looking, innocuous looking ways that look like, oh, women are so sweet, and they're not suited, they can't deal with boardroom jewels, and and we should maybe put them in the maybe human resources or whatever. I'm not saying human resources is a soft thing, but that's the kind of thinking that there is. And if you find even there, you find the men will be dominating the higher levels. So there is need. You see, I think that the thing is that we have in the law, in section 17 of the Constitution, there's a requirement that there be equal representation there, but that implementation, there's need for the government, the executive, to make sure that it puts in place policies and measures to do that. And also, I'm sure you remember that we are party to the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, whose Article 12 required that by 2015 they should have been no less than 50% of women's representation in leadership across SADC. So this is 2015, when this was supposed to be done. We're now in 2021 and we still haven't done this. So there's need for political will and programming and action. And also, I think also public education of men and women alike, because we need to know that, look, when women are demanding their 50% share, they're not asking, they're not asking to be given, because you see, it's when we say that, it's as if we're saying men are the ones that hold that and they own them and they are giving women. Yet, and it's not true, because what the reality is that for any man who's occupying a space in leadership that is beyond the 51%, the 51st percent are occupying women's positions, and that's what we need to remember, that they should then kindly relinquish them so that women can take their rightful positions. So it's not an act of charity, it's by right and it's by birthright, if I can call it that. So we need to drive that point home, and in Parliament also to debunk the myths that people say that, oh, but women should not be appointed, there is no should not be affirmative action because do they qualify, do they have merit? I've been a politician, Vera, and I can tell you, and I've been a member of Parliament, I can tell you that there's absolutely no qualification that's required to be a politician or a member of Parliament. I mean, there's so many women who can, if it's about qualifications, we can also find women with, but you don't need to have any. All you need to do is to be an MP in Zimbabwe. You need to be over 21 years of age. You need to be a citizen and register to vote. That's it. That's all. And from what I've seen from being inside there, I really don't think, with respect to the men, I really don't think that the men in there are that, that qualified and are of that high caliber and character. I'm sorry to say it doesn't, but for some reason, when it's men, anything goes. But when it's women, they ask, oh, but does she have the credentials? Does she have the capacity? That's never asked of men, and that's what keeps women away. So it's about finding women who also go and sleep and snore in parliament. We can also find some, but I'm sure it's not about that. But what I'm saying is that women qualify and are competent. We shouldn't start asking them questions because that kind of selection isn't done for men.
Why are most female MPs not active in parliament?
My take is that I actually don't think that's true. Actually, I don't think it's correct that most women MPs are not are silent in parliament, because that would mean that the contrast would be that most men speak in parliament. So sadly, I think that's again one of those things that impressions created about judging women very harshly and looking at them as not qualified for being in that space anyway. Because my experience in parliament shows me that most MPs don't speak in parliament. I mean, take any Hansard and count the number of people who speak in that parliament, who say either ask questions, debate. There are very few people. They only this. Usually, I don't think much has changed, but it's usually the same people, and that would be on maybe just about, let's say, maybe 30% of the MPs in parliament, male and female. And actually, my suspicion is that I think male MPs actually don't speak in parliament more because there are more. It would be interesting. I think I'd like us to do a survey and actually look at it, and because there's in our society, there's just that impression created that women are, because in the first place they are seen as, those questions we were talking about, women are scrutinized and people say, oh, does she have the capacity? Does she have the, and men are never asked about that. So it follows into when they're in parliament, they are not doing anything different from what the men do. And I suspect that women MPs, if we were to do the actually count, I think they actually speak more in proportion to their presence. I think they actually speak in proportion more to the men, but somehow it's just assumed that that arena is really for men, and men are the good MPs, they are the hardworking ones, they are brilliant, and women are just there to wear their costumes or whatever. So I'm not convinced that most women MPs don't speak. I doubt it. I think it's the stereotype.
As we head towards 2023, do you feel women have been empowered enough to stand on their own as MPs? This is in respect to proportional representation MPs.
I have a difficulty also, you know what I mean, with that, because I think differently. I really don't think that the proportional representation sits necessarily empower women as individuals to stand in parliament that much, you know what I mean. Maybe for some, but I don't. My understanding of that proportional representation was to make sure that we because the elections were going to make sure we weren't going to bring a 50% representation because of the way political parties are organized. They are dominated by men, and men will field the candidates, and they will have more candidates, and they'll come in parliament. That was really meant as a way to try and get to increase the numbers of women in parliament to start with. So because I don't think there's need for, like I was saying, I have a different view. There isn't that much need for empowering, and you know what I mean, that it's a frightening space, because there are women out there who are capable they just need a little encouragement, an opportunity to get there and speak. So because because I worry about this argument that, let's extend it because they aren't yet used to. It doesn't happen, because in any event, it will be the dynamics of politics and parties are such that there will be different women coming up and so on. It will be another excuse to avoid just making sure that there's 50%. I think those seats should fall away, and instead we amend the Electoral Act to make sure that when the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission delimitates constituencies, it also gender delimits. It simply does this. It takes it says these 110 constituencies are for men only, and then these 110 constituencies are for women only, and that and they are for women only for the next 2 terms, and then they are for men only in the next 2 terms, and then they switch over, and they do exactly the same for council seats. Over the 1,954 council wards in Zimbabwe, they do cut them in exactly half and say these wards are delimited, because they'll have to balance it by province, by district, to say these wards, this is a woman's ward. That's what we need. And because not to extend that quota, I mean, seriously speaking, it was meant to be for a certain time, and it will be tragic if it's used again to deny women getting their full quota of 50%. Women are going to be able to participate in that parliament. They don't need to be empowered first by seats. I mean, yeah, so those who have had the experience is good, the experience good for them. But again, you know, there's a turnover, people change and other new people come in and so on. So I don't think that those seats necessarily should be used as a reason not to just divide 50% and we're done.
You once mentioned being sued. You once mentioned suing Zim papers for defamation of character. Do you feel that the media often targets women as we are seen as weak?
Definitely, I think so. They look at, my experience has been that the media sometimes, in particular media characters, sometimes they target women who, like I said earlier, who dare to put their head up, raise their head above the parapet. They don't target the men. It's the women that they just go after, and they take slingshots and they go at them and they ridicule them, and they do all sorts of, it happens a lot of bullying, because, you know, if we're to measure it, it happens disproportionately higher given the lower numbers of women. So you find, when I was a politician, I used to find that sadly a lot of my fellow women politicians did not want to speak to the media at all, because they were terrified about what the media can do to them. They start asking about, they look for sex scandals and all sorts of things that are, I don't know why, for some reason they are more damaging for women than for men. Men come out smelling roses when they do that, and then they start, so a lot of women would be very reticent about the media, and then sadly it's like a vicious circle. Women then are careful because they'll be misquoted and they are not too sure what the journalists want, because the journalists sometimes spin in a way that caricatures women. And then when there are comments to be made and interviews to be made, journalists stop trying to pursue women because they will be wasting their time. They have a deadline, and then women's voices don't get heard, and then women don't get profiled. They're also serious politicians. They just get asked about the cookery and the raising children things and the just the marriage issues and the things like that, and then the the budget and the fiscus and maybe the constitution and the law and the balance of payments and the the government, that they don't get to be heard about that, but they've got opinions too. But I think there's need for work to reconcile and make peace between the media and cultivate relations between the media and women. Because I used to find I used to speak a lot, and I had to learn. I was burnt. A lot of my fingers were burnt a lot of the time, but I learned sort of to understand how to sort of work. But still, I'm not immune, and I wasn't immune to that being targeted and being harangued because you're daring to speak, and why are you out there? Yeah.
Speaking of balance of payments, do you think Zimbabwe has issues with unequal pay for women and men?
I would say yes, sadly. We also have that. Although, of course, the law was changed to the equal pay regulations, must be in 1984 or so, excuse me, when after independence. But the reality is still different. I mean, still men are able to, if you compare pay levels and also advancement levels and increments, you'll find that men will generally be able to even negotiate better packages and get better perks, and on the whole they get paid better. And when women go, it's only now, hopefully, like when women go on maternity leave, they lose earnings, but now that the law requires that women on maternity leave also get paid equally, I think sadly it will result also in women being unattractive to employers, because to be honest, it's not fair to burden an employer with 100% salary for a woman who's on maternity leave. I think the state, my view is that the state should not have done that without taking that responsibility. the state itself must be the one that must pay, because that must pay for that difference between a woman worker's salary and not pile it on the employer, because the National Social Security Authority, in my view, it should be doing that. I have no idea. I can't imagine why it doesn't do that. Because in the end, women will then have less even pensions, pension contributions, and so on. They do earn less and promoted less, and have also fewer access to other like income, projects, or also assignments, or being deployed to. In a lot of workplaces, people get allowances for being out of station, etc. But then women again somehow don't go as much, because some of them they still have to take care of children. There isn't equal sharing, and so they miss out on some perks and some benefits that can accrue from maybe going away somewhere. So they still earn less, unfortunately.
You are very active on Twitter. Did you attend a secret Twitter university, or does this all come naturally to you?
I like the idea of a secret Twitter university. I did that, which is Twitter itself. Yeah, I learned from Twitter itself. But I will say I'm not as active as I used to be. I decided to scale back because I was targeted really brutally last year, and I thought this is not worth my while. And because I no longer need to use it like I did. I used to use it as a tool for communication when I was and Facebook when I was member of parliament. It was my only means to hold constituency town hall meetings, and also it was my office because there were no offices apart from that. So I used to be very active because I learned how, because I had to it was important for me to communicate and engage with my constituents and my audience. So I learned that way, and I made mistakes were made on me and so on, and I knew how to learn to get up dust myself, carry on, and so it was, I learned from doing.
What is the one legacy you want to leave behind?
The one legacy I want to leave behind is that of participation at the participation in national affairs. I mean, the importance of giving a voice and pushing for what one believes in for the greater good. That being vocal and asking and pushing and not being afraid and speaking out and being known for having stood for important causes, such as, for me, one of my key causes when I was an MP was I decided to use that space to end gender-based violence, or rather to improve the state response to gender-based violence from the whole cycle, from investigations, prosecution, trials, and convictions and sentencing. That is one. That's what I want to be. One of the things I want to be remembered for pushing to get changes, as well as also holding to account those who are in office, such as, like I mentioned, the State of the Nation address, to us to say, why isn't the president issuing a State of the Nation address when the Constitution requires it? So I want to be remembered for speaking the truth and for speaking it confidently and boldly, in order for there to be improvements, and which would then be made.
Thank you so much for your time. We have one last question for you. What is your idea of a perfect Zimbabwe?
My idea of a perfect Zimbabwe is a Zimbabwe in which everyone who lives in it has a chance to the best quality of life that Zimbabwe can offer, from the material end in terms of amenities and financial resources, physical environment, as well as also social environment and just respect, just like any other, I'd want Zimbabwe, just like countries that are ranked in the most livable places in the world and even high on the happiness index. That's my idea of the perfect Zimbabwe, and I believe it's possible. I believe we can attain that if each of us do our bit every day to be that to the next person, to ourselves, and to be accountable to ourselves, and to keep demanding what is right and what is just, and not resign to just mediocrity or suffering or wrong things, but us ourselves being, each of us, active and acting that way. I'm sure we can I'm sure we can have that, Zimbabwe. I hope to see it in my lifetime, though.
Thank you so much for giving us some of your time. We're going to leave you now to enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and good evening to you too.